Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Property AI Report. This is your weekly digest of all things property and AI, brought to you by me, Mal McCallion, and my good friend and co-host, Matt Goddard. Matt, how are you today?
Wonderful, Malcolm. How's your voice? It sounds a little hoarse.
Yes. I was singing a little high at a gig last night, this is what happens, kids, and so be careful out there, all right? However, we're going to persevere at least until it runs out. We should probably, in order to try and get to the end of this, start our property news. All right. First up in our property news, there's a lot about stats. So we've got a shock leap in rent levels as Renters' Rights Act disrupts the market. So this is news that we've basically got rent inflation reached its highest level in nearly 2 years in June. This has been put down to the Renters' Rights Act. This is decent stats from Good Lord. So there was low inflation for the first 5 months, and then suddenly it's just shot up. And the kind of anecdotal stuff that I'm hearing is that obviously landlords were trying to get it in, pretty quickly after. To get the deals done before the Renters' Rights Act came in, and then actually still a couple of months until it actually came into effect. This is a focus I know for you and some of the stuff you do. What's your take?
No surprise really for me. The two bits really that stand out, once you think back to the tenant fee ban and when sort of a lot of income was lost on that front, we saw rents rise as sort of landlords started taking the brunt of a little bit of that, and rents were sort of inflated in a way to cover some of the additional costs on that front. But also, as you sort of alluded to there's people getting out of the market, right? And if you remove properties from the market and suddenly there's less demand, more demand, less stock, then of course rents are going to go up. And I think talking it through rapidly, the third part is now that you have you can't overbid, probably not the right term, on rents. You can only accept offers to the line of what's being marketed out. And a lot of landlords, as you say, were serving Section 13s in the run up to Tenant Renters' Rights Act kicking in. Suddenly people are actually increasing the market price to get those properties back on and re-let at the last chance they could before all this new legislation came in. So there's a number of factors that I don't think anyone should really be surprised there's been a leap, even though the headline is shock leap in rent levels.
Yeah, that's really true. Yeah, it's like kind of everybody sort of predicted that this was probably what was going to happen. Anybody who knows the property market for sure. So yeah, exactly that. I know a load of people who have had notice, the day before, 30th of April, 28th, because that's 24 hours notice, saying that basically their rent was going to go up in X months time, and I think they're just starting to feed into June's figures. And obviously the market, the test is it reasonable for the market? Obviously picking the highest figures that they could, and then almost challenging tenants to kind of challenge it. Actually, are you going to try and argue the toss? And then there's the threat that actually that might mean that the tenant gets kicked out. So I don't, again, anecdotally, I don't think many are kind of challenging it. I think they're just accepting it. And so it will probably settle down a little bit as we go through the year and stuff. But yeah, it's a kind of, it's just one of those things about ill thought through sort of legislation that just keeps coming into our industry. That's like, it has the exact opposite effect of what the intention was. And it's like, just kind of what everybody said was going to happen, just happens. So that's on the rental side. On the sales side, again, from the statistical viewpoint, we've got some better news, I think. Nationwide says that decent amount of price growth kind of picking up, which kind of is good news for the industry in terms of its indication of certainly busyness. Again, Matt, what are you hearing out there?
Sort of seeing the bits and pieces coming through, I think it's difficult to call because I'd spent a lot of time in central London, and I think there's still a challenge in that area. And it's not just because I live not far from central London. I think we'll get a decent amount of feedback probably from Cluffle Conference next week, where everyone comes together from more regions, but it certainly does sound more positive outside of the M25. You've done a heavy tour, and I think you're still touring as well, aren't you? What sort of anecdotes are you hearing?
Yes, we're about 3/4 of the way through the tour just now, and so there's this sort of cautious optimism, I'd say. It does seem like it was a bit flat. Kind of for a couple of months. And there's kind of hope that, there'll be a little bit of a bump over the next month or so just before sort of summer comes. So yeah, there's a lot, I'd say probably a lot more positivity than there was sort of like about 8 weeks ago. And again, I think as with all markets, when it becomes sort of steady, then people work out how to actually deal with it. So I think agents are now much more kind of focusing buyers and sellers particularly on, the differential between what they, even if they're not quite getting what they want for their property, the fact that they can then move to their next property and get that cheaper actually is a much more successful way of sort of messaging. So I think the nuances have changed, and I think that's the sort of what the smart agents are doing for sure. And yeah, there's kind of this feeling that it is that maybe we bottomed out a bit, and actually now there's kind of a bit of a climb, and obviously heading towards the summer where there may be a bit of a lull, but then going on to the autumn and hopefully a busy season where, with any luck, we might actually get a bit of stability. Now I know we have kind of heralded this for a long old time as a hope on this podcast, but actually, if Andy Burnham's installed as expected on the 17th of July, the Iran war just kind of sort of almost blurs into the background because no more shocks, and because the midterms are coming up for Trump's, as we head into November, he's not going to want to do anything that's going to interrupt the oil price. Then actually, just maybe, December might be quite good. So yes, hopefully those discretionary sales and all that sort of stuff will start to come through. So yeah, I know a lot of agents are hoping for that, preparing for that. And that's, I think there is a good chance that actually that's going to come to pass. So yeah, fingers crossed. Also, just as a kind of aside, we mentioned the nationwide one there. It's just a little, almost like an RIP to the Halifax Price Index, which has been a staple part of certainly our lives for pretty much the entire time I've been in the property market, because it's changing its name. Yeah. Lloyd's is getting rid of the Halifax brand, so it's now going to be called the Lloyd's Price Index. So, moment silence, RIP. But yes, it'll be back under a different banner, I'm sure, next month. Right, we move on. Let's move on. Stats, let's move on to politics. So just really a kind of whistle-stop tour through all of the commentary around Andy Burnham's impending arrival, assumed a pending arrival. And, anything floated at this point is obviously all speculative, and there is nothing has actually come through as a hard policy from him. Everybody's kind of looking at what he's done up in Manchester and kind of trying, as mayor of Manchester, and trying to work out whether it could apply nationally. But yes, tax is certainly something that is being discussed as being coming quite hard for particularly higher value homes, which seems a little bit likely, I think, because there isn't that much money around. Again, without going too deep into politics, Starmer seems to have handed him something of a poison chalice with a defence review that needs 4.7 billion of extra cash from somewhere. Matt, again, we don't like to delve too much into the politics side, but there are some kind of housing stories associated with this. What do you think the Burnham coronation might mean for the housing market?
Isn't there quite an illustrious address in Downing Street going to come up for sale as part of the decamping the PM to Manchester or the North? That was probably the biggest story, wasn't it? Who's battling for the valuation on that gaff? Is that the one's going to cover those off? Some of your self-employed agents. But the biggest one probably in the headline is the double death tax, isn't there? Where there's this potential double bubble of the inheritance tax and the capital gains tax coming through on some of those properties. What was the one that stood out for you?
If only for the headline, the double death tax, I think certainly was one. And look, this always happens, right? There's always some like macabre kind of description of something that is really a relatively mundane tax. Basically, it's a cash transfer, but it's not. It's a double death tax. Yeah, look, again, all speculation just is disruptive, and that's what bugs me. That's why when the 17th of July comes, hopefully he's not going to sit there and go, right, we're going to have another terrible budget because of all the horrible things that we've been left, and it's going to happen in November. Because the last 2 years, that's exactly what happened with Rachel Reeves. She did it twice, and it just depressed the whole market up until then. So hopefully it's going to be relatively straightforward. There's going to be just kind of some low-key announcements, just things that are going to happen. We can just crack on because it's been way too long since there's been a period of stability, and we really, really need it, because there are many discretionary sales that have not happened. The death, divorce, debts have always will, as we know, but yes, the discretionary ones that really feed the market and really feed the industry and feed optimism and confidence and so on. So yes, what I hope is that there's nothing too dramatic, and that anything is kind of set in stone early, so that we don't end up with just this kind of constant chit chat about how awful it's going to be for homeowners. And we just get a relatively stable environment. So yes, fingers crossed on that going forwards. Right. Other news around sort of product side of things. We've got self-employed. So the couple of kind of smaller platforms have come through over the last week or so, which is really interesting. They kind of come in little flurries, I've always found. So we've got here a self-employed broker platform where a new platform uses AI to match sellers with what it considers to be the best suited local self-employed estate agent. So it's quite niche. I think it's fair to say. And it's, so if I think the 20 EA stats say that it is about 4% of the market is self-employed or something like that over the now. So this is basically helping people to surf through that 4% and find the best personal estate agent for them. Now, absolutely, if people are really into their self-employed agents, if that's the market for them, then being able to compare those individual humans is probably quite important, I'd imagine, because actually, that can be the difference. But it does feel like it's kind of, very, very, very specific.
Very niche. And do you think people, everyday people, but those that don't listen to our podcast, know even what a personal estate agent means? So they're not going to be.
Are you suggesting people who listen to our podcast are not normal people? Is that what you're saying?
Well, they're very, very specific and the bleeding cutting edge of all developments, right? But if you spoke, I was about to name my dad, but if you spoke to, knocked on next door and said, you're thinking of selling your house, what are you going to do? They go, I'm going to speak to the personal estate agent that's the best in my local area. And that's what they go off looking for. I think that's a bit niche. And I think one of the challenges we've got at the moment is a lot of, and it's great because there's a lot of entrepreneurs now able to do a lot more, but there's a lot of websites and apps and development coming out of vibe coding, isn't there? And it's a case of, here is what's going on, this is what we want to do. But in the same way that a lot of agents talk about vendors and applicants in their sort of consumer-based advertising. And if I was selling my house prior to working in the industry, would I have thought of myself as a vendor? Just like, I'm a guy trying to sell a house, you're a person 100%. Trying to buy a house. And I think that's probably the only part of this. But good luck to them. It's an area that is growing, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. There's interestingly, there's been things like self-employed magazines that have come out, or very specific self-employed kind of ratings and review sites, and all sorts of
Are you flicking through the magazine articles in your local news agents?
Well, for self-employed agents. No, it's an online platform. It's I think Don Versace's putting it out, something like that. But it's very but dedicated to that particular part of the market. And it's it looks like it's again, it's really fascinating how people cater to growing areas of the market suddenly, and then suddenly these things kind of grow up around it. So I do think it's a growing area of our industry, and I think fair play. The likes of EXP, the likes of Keller Williams, again the likes of Mivelli, IAD, people like that, there's a lot going on. But actually, like you say, does your average person in the street actually differentiate between them on the basis of you are a personal agent, you are not a personal agent, versus you've got loads of boards up in my street and I've heard of you. So I think it's going to be interesting, like you say, and perhaps to the second sort of product launch this week, which is a new property portal called Find My Move that seems to be very focused around rental properties that accept DSS. And again, potentially important, potentially very niche, but it is, to your point, just a kind of clear indicator of how much more straightforward it is using AI to build these products out. But actually, there's the classic, just because you can, does that mean that you should? There's a lot of energy, a lot of focus on this sort of stuff. I think people learn so much from building businesses. I think that's great and really important. And I think, again, I think there's going to be so many more entrepreneurs and so many more good products and services out there that are decent. But it then all comes down to trust and all that sort of stuff. And do you actually think that this is a product that's going to be there for the long term with you? So really interesting to kind of just sort of take a pulse of how the industry is kind of continuing to develop. But I think that it will, we'll see a raft of these things as the kind of summer progresses.
It's an interesting one as well, Find My Move, isn't it? Because by rights, housing needs is something where people shouldn't be turning them down, and you get your generation rent and your shelters all shouting about, you shouldn't have landlords or agents turning down those requirements in the same way you no longer can turn down pets. But these agents just spun up a portal for it, and they've got quite a decent, was it 435,000 listings already?
Yeah, which sounds, having built a few portals in my time, sounds a little bit, have I mentioned that ever? Yes, that's a lot to have kind of sealed deals with and got kind of feeds directly from and all that sort of stuff. So if that's come to pass, then good on them. But I haven't heard of any, as I've gone around the country, any agents that have said we're uploading to this thing, and and it's great. So yeah, again, well, remains to be seen where those kind of came from. But yes, it's going to be interesting to see how this develops, and no doubt a plethora of other competitors that cater to very specific perceived problems in the industry as well. Right, that is the end of our property news this week. Let us dive into our really rather exciting AI and tech news. Matt, we've been quite excited this week, haven't we? Because it's back, Fable 5.
Yeah.
Fable 5 from Claude. Fable 5 dropped back again. I'm going to say Thursday night, I think. We're recording this on Saturday morning. It is 9:09 on the 4th of July. Happy Independence Day, all of our millions of United States listeners. So yes, Fable 5 is back. Now, just to recap, it is the first of the Mythos class models that has come out. It was banned by the Trump administration probably three and a half weeks ago now when it first landed, because as it transpired, as we were kind of almost listening to the gossip at the time, was because Amazon basically told the Trump administration that this was too easy to jailbreak and that foreign actors could use it for ill means. So basically the Trump administration kind of canned it, and it's been sitting on the sidelines waiting for a release date ever since. A lot of kind of commentary, speculation around all of this in terms of why it was first of all pulled. Was it actually because there's some animosity between the kind of core players in the Trump administration and Anthropic, the makers of Claude, or is it because actually it is really, really, really a genuine threat to America and so on. Matt, I know you've been playing around with it as well. So first of all, from the kind of high level stuff, any thoughts on the reason why it's back now rather than a week ago, 2 weeks ago? And then what's it like?
From a political point of view, it seems that Dario Amodei was the one that just didn't get on well with the administration or vice versa, right? And he's been sidelined in these conversations, and one of the other founders of Anthropic, I forget his name, has been put more in the hot seat, and it seemed to work through. And I don't actually think Anthropic expected to get the green light to re-release it, because they actually put out Sonnet 5 and sort of what felt like mere moments before you started WhatsApping me to say it was back. And it definitely was Thursday night, because I woke up Friday morning to your normal "it's back type of WhatsApp message. But
for keepsies.
Yeah, exactly. Well, until the 7th of July, right? So we've when it was initially launched, we had 22nd of June through the 29th of June or something like that, where we're going to have it for part of our subscriptions, and then it's going to go on to an API cost. And I've done the same again now. So as you say, it's the 4th of July, happy Independence Day, and the 9th. So no, sorry, 7th of July is when it's going to get pulled, and you have to then start paying through the nose for it. It is an expensive model, but it's extremely capable. And it's a question of, over the next 3 days, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to unleash on the world? I've already got it building me an MCP server for Microsoft, because you can only attach one Microsoft account at a time to Claude and Codex. So I've got multiple Microsoft accounts for the various hats that I wear. So it's off doing that in the background, which might explain why the signal on this keeps coming and going. What about you? What are you kicking on with while Fable 5's part of your subscription?
Yeah, so much. So just to be clear about the kind of like the tectonic plates around all this. So Sonnet 5, up to this point, we'd had Sonnet 4.7, I'm going to say, something like that, which essentially was a really capable but kind of day-to-day model. So, whereas you were using, so Claude had three models, Haiku, which was a super fast one. It had Sonnet, which was the kind of really good generalist, and then had Opus for the big jobs. So Fable 5 came in above Opus. Opus was on 4.8. Sonnet was on about 4.7. So now they released the mid-range one, the kind of day-to-day one, as Sonnet 5. So that was a big jump. Really kind of good reviews. Kind of people saying that it is amazing. It always tends to put out really, really amazing models. But literally about, as you say, 6 hours later, suddenly Fable 5 was re-released, and Sonnet 5 almost got lost in the kind of like, oh my God, it's back. So yeah, no, I've been using it as you have, like basically madly, because on, as you say, on the 7th of July, in 3 days' time, you can no longer access Fable 5, not for any political reasons, purely commercial reasons. So basically, Anthropic's going, look, get addicted to this stuff. It's really, really great, isn't it? Ooh, now we
have a bit of a taste, get some interest.
Absolutely, and then we'll put it behind this paywall, and then you've got to pay through the nose to actually have it as a separate account from your normal Claude day-to-day work subscription, basically. So yeah, an interesting model. I'm sure others will follow, which might explain one of our latest stories about how ChatGPT is changing the names of its models, as we'll see. But yes, so having used Fable 5, again, it's phenomenal. The way that I kind of keep thinking about it is, it almost thinks what your next question is going to be and answers that, and then like the subsequent 3 questions after that. So it's already done all that thinking and all that answering before you've even started to formulate the questions after the question that you originally asked. So it's really, really intelligent. Anybody out there, do use the next kind of 2-3 days to have a play around with it. It is well worth, even pump priming maybe getting the 85 quid Claude subscription just to see what is possible with this thing before it goes behind its curtain. But yeah, no, I've found it to be exceptional. Been doing a number of different projects with it, and yes, we'll probably be one of those people that ends up paying through the nose for it in a separate channel, just because there will be certain things, and this is true of all of it. And again, for everybody out there, we are going to start having to make decisions about which of these models we use for which particular task. It's almost like we're not going to have this sort of omni model that we just kind of go, right, you decide. We're going, right, this one is so expensive and Fable 5 is so expensive in terms of cost per token. That's that you're going to be really picky about, right, I'm only going to give that AI the really, really deep jobs. And then when it comes back with an answer, then I'm going to kind of shred that into various other different AIs so that they can kind of follow up on it. But yeah, it's a beast. And it is well worth a look. Hard on the heels of that, then, there is a lot of talk around GPT 5.6. Okay, so this is OpenAI, competitor to Claude. ChatGPT, sorry, is the competitor to Claude. And 5.6 is notionally an incredibly powerful model as well, not dissimilar to Fable 5. But and yes, the government has requested restrictions on its rollout, as they did with Fable 5, so that they're able to test it before it goes live, to make sure that it doesn't allow bad actors to access systems and to reveal vulnerabilities that have not been already seen, observed using the model and fixed by the various companies, particularly American organizations. This feels, Matt, very much like a kind of a licensing / kind of regulatory regime in all but name. What's your take?
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost by stealth, isn't it? But playing out slightly in the public, because there's a number of things. And Tim Berners-Lee, who obviously created the internet or the World Wide Web, chipped in and said, it's basically a de facto model licensing system that's kicked in, and it's starting to see in those the versus them type approach as well, where we had seen that with Mythos and Glasswing under the concept of give this to some companies to test and check for their own vulnerabilities who underpin the world more. But ultimately, I can see this being a case, certain institutions get the best models, and then sort of we're limited to less powerful, intelligent things, and it's almost like what the muggles get versus the different tiering, and there's obviously concern around that, but in a way as well, like there's still this noise in the background about making sure that these models aren't available to non-US citizens, and there's a talk of this know your client type approach, and Amadei in a way has got a little bit to answer for, because he was saying AI is going to need a license in the same way that guns need a license in America, and it's sort of heading that way. And
yeah,
certainly that's why people have, as you say, looking at the smaller models and the ones that are readily available, so you don't end up committing a lot of time. Companies like OpenRouter, who I met on my trip last month, are being utilized a lot more because they can do that bit behind the scenes and just work out what the use case is and route you to the right model. And then also the free and the Chinese models are being utilized as well, aren't they? Rather than sort of pinning your hopes on something that's like 5.6 that maybe we won't ever actually get access to in its true guise.
Yeah, and it is really the kind of politics of this is the problem, I think, and actually will have a long lasting problem for American models, I reckon, because there is this kind of if you saw Trump doing his speech in front of Mount Rushmore last night, he's very much like anti sort of anybody who's not in his view American, and that obviously means there's a lot of people who that he doesn't want to have access to what he perceives to be American and AI and stuff like that. So there seems to be that kind of very specific seam of politics kind of coming through into this particular policy, which is actually we don't want the other to have this. That means that people are making decisions right now in Africa, in Europe, and all this sort of stuff. And we have these similar thoughts and conversations here around actually, do we want to pin our our kind of development and, all of our kind of ongoing work on models that may disappear or may, suddenly become, dumbed down, where you ask it the wrong question, that actually flips through to a stupider model. So yeah, any time you get this sort of level of kind of infiltration or level of influence coming in from outside bodies for reasons that are not purely about the tech or not purely about the commercial side of things, then it does skew decisions. And it means that actually, I would say as a result of this, that American dominance in AI in the medium term is under threat, because people aren't going to look at that and go, do you know what, maybe I will take a risk on OpenAI, or will take a risk on Anthropic, because at any point in time, Pete Hegseth could fall out with one of them, or there could be Trump could turn around and go, actually, do you know what, I don't like the fact that this particular model is diverse, or whatever it is, and that genuinely means that that people will not invest using these particular models. So yeah, I think it is a shame, and it will stymie creativity, and some of the best engineers will not want to work in the American labs. They'll want to work in the Chinese labs or elsewhere. But yes, it's going to be self-defeating, I think, for sure. It is deeply frustrating.
Sam Altman obviously gets it as well, doesn't he? Because he's the CEO of OpenAI. He's proposing handing over 5% of OpenAI to the Trump administration so they can start basically a sovereign wealth fund. And he's also encouraging Anthropic and the others to do something similar. And so maybe seeing that as a bit of a sweetheart deal that ensures that there's not so much being held up in these things.
It's an expensive kind of way of going about it, but yeah, I think practically speaking, Altman is very good at the politics side, possibly better than Anthropic's CEO Dario Amodei. But yes, the fact that they have to go to these lengths to do business, again, kind of feels like they have to bend the knee. And some of the stuff that came out of Anthropic, and again, as you pointed out. So this is when they were re-releasing Fable 5, was the compromises they've had to make, the fact they've had to say, we'll of course give the administration, access to this and that and this and that. It felt like Amodei was moved aside so that somebody else could say those words, because there was never a chance that he was going to say that, because he doesn't want to do it. Yes, so lots still to play out, I'm sure, in that, and 5.6 coming down the track once everybody's checked it and once everybody's made peace with the administration. But yes, again, that should be a good model. I have slight suspicion that the fact it's 5.6 means that it's not GPT-6, which we think is going to come out relatively soon. So they're not at the Mythos level. But yes, it kind of feels a little bit convenient that they can kind of make it a bit more about the politics than actually about the tech, because the suspicion is for them and for Google Gemini that they're not. Anthropic has shot ahead with Fable 5 and with Mythos, and the other guys are kind of running to catch up, and this is a decent smokescreen for why they're not quite there yet. Right, on to one of the other big tech businesses, Meta, aka Facebook. Their shares have jumped because they are looking to potentially rent out some infrastructure space, just like Elon Musk and his XAI have done. Matt, give us an update on this.
So Musk did it just before the SpaceX IPO, didn't he? And it's sold absolute ton, very big amount of billions to Anthropic and various other people. So basically renting out those
Google,
places. And Meta have obviously built a huge amount of capacity and now able to do sort of similar thing. And their share prices have jumped 9% in line with being able to offer that. So I was trying to remember that it's almost like a Nouveau hosting type approach, where instead of going to your classic AWS, Azure, etc., GCP, it's that you can go to Meta and SpaceX. And why wouldn't you, when SpaceX's IPO went so large, if you've got that capacity and the opportunity to share something which we know is a restricted resource, right? It's especially in America, where they're coming down hard on building new data centers, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. It's not popular in an election year to have a massive data center parked up in your nice little fields near your village or town. So yeah, no, it does seem like these kind of neo clouds, I think they're called, are the ones that that they're starting to get a lot of attention, because some of the bigger projects are not getting off the ground. So actually, how can they utilize the spare capacity that they've got within their own data centers? Obviously, Meta itself has got a huge amount, and it makes money. And guess what? Their shares popped by 9% on the back of it. So it's obviously a very lucrative place to go. Talking of lucrative, AWS, so Amazon Web Services, has plowed $1 billion into a new AI unit that's going to embed engineers into its clients. And this is off the back of a story from 2-3 weeks ago that we covered with the forward deployed engineers, FDEs, and the other frontier labs are basically pushing out into the various businesses to help them to understand AI, basically, and to be able to use it. So, Matt, I know this is something that you are looking at very carefully. What's your thoughts?
No, it perfectly makes sense, doesn't it? It is something that I took away from the Sastra conference, this forward deployed engineers or FDEs, that basically consultants and solution architects who come into your business and help you. And sort of the 1 billion is a massive headline because obviously it's a lot of cash, but OpenAI spent 4 billion acquiring consultancies and bringing them onto the banner of DeployCo. I think Microsoft have partnered with EY to do something similar, because it's all well and good having this phenomenal capability, but there is that overhang of how you utilize it. We talk about it regularly on this, and there's some people that we chat to, and they've not using the subscription model versus the paid model. The free model of, say, Claude, and therefore they've not got as many connectors available. I'm doing some work with some companies where we're using a new thing called Linear, and people aren't able to update Linear using Claude or Codex because they're not got the paid model. If you've got a capability on that sort of level, imagine if you are like a huge enterprise business and you've got a lot you want to transform, but you just don't have that knowledge or availability to do it. That's where these forward deployed engineers come in with that skill and mindset to do it. So AWS jumping in on that doesn't surprise me, especially given you've got like AWS Bedrock and those sort of things ready to take on.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so absolutely, and I think that's going to become more of a feature of for every business. Who can you go to find this this expertise to be able to help you to kind of get there? And obviously, that's something that I know you and I are both kind of focused on, because it's the kind of goal is to help people to understand it, and that's one of the purposes of this conversation, but also to actually be able to implement it within the businesses too. Yeah, no, I think that's very much part of the future of how AI is going to be distributed into the kind of commercial community. All right, few more bits to cover off as quickly as we possibly can. ChatGPT and 5.6. They've released 3 different names for ChatGPT 5.6, as we discussed just a bit earlier. Terra and Luna are the new versions. They are kind of intended to match Claude's Haiku, Sonnet, and Opus. Why do you think they're doing this?
I think before we go into why they're doing it, for those that don't play with the 1% club and don't pick up on the pattern matching, whilst it's Sol Terra, it's not Terra run screaming from something. It's Terra as in Earth and Lunar as in Moon. So Sun, Earth, and Moon being those levels of performance, right? And I think it comes back to the point you made earlier, that if you're looking at the cost, and as we move to this sort of not token maxing anymore, the token scarcity, and actually looking at how you utilize the models, knowing which one you're using for which role of the sort of the process you're talking about, helps you say, actually, I'm going to send my day-to-day stuff to Terra or Earth, and maybe the really rapid stuff off to Luna, and the big research pieces or hard coding effort over to Sol. And so I think very much that separating them ahead of probably more changes to their pricing models, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it all comes down to the kind of commerciality of this in the end, doesn't it? If you just got ChatGPT 5.6 and you've got a bit of, it's instant and thinking, wasn't it? It was instant and thinking, and then on thinking, you could kind of put different levels of thinking, like low, medium, and high. It's like, what the hell? Just like, what's the difference between thinking medium? What's the difference between thinking low and instant, and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, this is intended to give at least a kind of notion of sanity and expectation and control and structure around which model you're going to choose. But yeah, like you say, the fact that they must have spent millions on coming up with these names and sat around forever in like these meetings going, oh yeah, what do you think about this? Oh yeah, and then they've called one of them Terra. It's like, I think everybody is quite afraid of AI. I don't know, guys. Maybe rethink your marketing strategy on that. But yeah, and Terra's the middle one as well, which is the one that like everybody's going to use.
Exactly.
So it's just like so crazy. Right, that is pretty much all we got for our AI and tech news this week. We wanted to just drop into our tool of the week. Right, this is one of our very favorites. It's actually something I talk about like at every meeting I go out to at the moment on the tour, get everybody to record the actual conversation as well and the presentation so that they can then put it into this particular tool and then interrogate and do all that sort of stuff. So Matt, we're focused this week on Google Notebook LM, aren't we?
Exactly. It is. We are big fans of Google Notebook. In fact, I think you probably spoke about it first way back October, 2 years ago at the Property Portal Watch conference. And
Yeah, I
that
remember.
was when it was doing the pod overviews, the audio ones. But this is brilliant. And what it sort of aligns with in my head is it's like a blink list where you can have summaries of books that you listen to and look at. And it almost becomes like doom scrolling, but things you want to see. So you can create your video overviews and have them all ready so that if you are on the bus or the train or the loo, however you consume video content, you can actually have things that you've pre-programmed and you're watching those video overviews of art history in the world of surrealism is their example there. It's not something I just picked out of my
I was going to say, mate, very erudite.
It's strong for me, isn't it? You release these sort of overviews, but you're actually able to consume that content. So it might be that, or it might be something you're preparing for work and you're going to be sat on the train, and rather than wait for your laptop to connect to the train Wi-Fi, get them sort of ready to go. And this comes back to, we talked about Fable 5 and the fact we've only got until Monday. You can actually be building a pipeline of creating content for you to consume in these ways, rather than thinking, do you know what, I'm going to create a video overview for when I'm traveling to Newport on Monday for the Kerfuffle conference. But actually you could have something that building these things and having them all ready for you using Fable 5, so that it's just there. You have a thought, I want to investigate that, just queue it up and then have Fable 5 build that pipeline that just prepares them all for you. But you don't have to
100%.
sit on TikTok or Instagram consuming all that other stuff about the big fire in Peckham, as I utilised last week. It's something where you can actually use it as a bit of a growth mindset as well.
Yeah, exactly. And it is an interesting kind of juxtaposition between what you get fed, on your feeds via, whether the insert generation here, Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok. But actually, this is yours. This is actually things that are going to be interesting to you, rather than the algorithm thinks is going to be interesting to you. So yes, you can go and build out some really amazing stuff that actually takes you deep into things that are genuinely of interest to you. From a business perspective, you can actually, if there are areas you're thinking about moving into, geographies, then you can kind of get like a load of those kind of built out. And kind of really start to kind of gen up on some of the real niche detail that actually is amazing to people who are selling property in that area that Also, do things about what's going to come down the track. How is what's likely going to come out of various initiatives around the country and so on. So yeah, I think it's just a really good update to what is already a really, really powerful piece of kit. And I think everybody should go and have a little play with it for sure. All right, that is it for our property and AI news this week. Thank you, everybody, for listening in. And thanks, as ever, to you, Matt, for being there. What are you up to for the rest of this fine weekend?
Hopefully very little. How about yourself? You got any more gigs to go to?
Do you know what? Going to glamorous Guildfest this weekend.
Awesome.
So Guildford has Guildfest, and it's got some really, really stellar names on there. It's got ABC, it's got Inspiral Carpets, it's got Sophie Ellis-Bextor, various others, Tiffany. So yeah, no, should be amusing, if nothing else. And very much looking forward to it. Should be fun. All right, well, listen, everybody else, I hope you are having similarly a great weekend. We will catch up with you again in 7 days' time. All the best. Take care.
Take care, guys.